we're going to hop right into it here, and I want to introduce the folks that are joining me today. Again, for those of you who don't know me, I partner with most of our customers, or our team does. But joining me today, Boris, you want to go ahead and say hello and introduce yourself?
Thanks, Jason. Thanks for having me. My name is Boris Grinchman. I work on the product team here at LiveVox, and I'm excited to be talking to you about the topic of AI today. So, Jason, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Boris. And we've got a new face with us, Boris. We brought in a co-anchor here. Dave, you want to say hi to the group?
Yeah, thank you, Jason. Hi, I'm David Buman. I'm brand new to LiveVox. I'm the Senior Lead Business Solutions Consultant, and I saw an incredible opportunity in LiveVox, and I'm thrilled to be part of this journey. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. We're happy to have you for sure. So let's just hop into the content here. We're going to, as we go through this deck, we'll try to give a few minutes to questions at the end. If we get you out early, even better. But so as we go through the agenda, we're going to talk about, first and foremost, the need for self-service. We're going to identify opportunities. We're going to get started with virtual agents and how you go about that. And then Boris is going to share with you a little bit about what it means to tune and refine that program. And then lastly, we'll go over the resources and the Q&A that can get you there. Because again, this is a kind of a brand new venture. Boris, you want to kick us off and kind of talk about how we got here?
Yeah, absolutely. Would love that. So one of the things that we've noticed from having lots of conversations with clients and on this particular topics is that a lot of clients, specifically clients today in the customer care space, have been overwhelmed by the number of inbound phone calls. And that's not to say that people haven't staffed for this, but what they're seeing specifically is that when call volumes get high, which is, of course, call volumes have risen over the course of the last few months and maybe even last year, we see, of course, average speeds of answer also increase at the same time. And I don't think this is really surprising, Jason, but customers hate being on hold, and this really leads to poor customer experience. And this is something that I think everybody already knows, right? This isn't necessarily revolutionary. But at the same time that we saw a lot of our clients see increases in hold volumes, increases in speeds of answers, we also saw that staffing has been a greater challenge than it has been before. Obviously, we're coming out of a pandemic that had put a lot of, let's call it, squeeze on our staffing capabilities within contact centers today, but it's harder and harder to find really great employees who are going to be able to deliver that great customer service and continue to sort of value the job that they're having today. And we've seen that again from a number of our clients. How do I tap pools? How do I actually get the staff that I need within my contact center consistently over a period of time? And how do I fight that attrition that plagues every contact center today?
Yeah, Boris, this is kind of the age-old question, right? And we used to tackle it with outbound blasting campaigns, and then it became the dialer, then it became HCI. But again, the challenge of first hiring and then keeping those agents is just becoming more and more complicated. We've seen that over the last year for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's pretty interesting, we were looking at a study quite recently that started to take a look and compare what happens when you have high hold times or longer wait times when you're sort of crunched in staffing. What happens actually is a little bit of an interesting human dynamic. And that is when people wait for a very long time in order to speak to a particular representative, they actually have more things to talk about. They feel like they have to get everything sort of, if you will, off their chest. Obviously they're looking to get a particular problem solved within the contact center, but then they've had more time to sort of either complain about the fact that they were on hold for a long period of time, or to feel like they have to address every issue because they don't want to go through that experience of having to be on hold for a really long time should they need to contact your organization again. And this is what we see as a contributing factor to these increased handle times rising over the course of the last 12 months plus.
It's interesting. I think it's just like we see our customers, right, Boris? We talked about on the webinars, our customers and our customers' customers are becoming more complex. You're right. They expect more information. They expect that information immediately, and any delay in that is a problem. So yeah, this is all good data. Let's hop to the next slide here. And now the $1 million question, right? What are we going to do about it? And self-service isn't new to anybody on this call, but we're going to talk about it in a very different light today. So first and foremost, the benefits of self-service, for those of you that obviously don't know this already, right? Helps you deal with a lot of high call volumes that can threaten the customer experience. It can reduce wait times and abandon times for customers that are less and less willing to sit on hold, like Boris just showed you. Today's customer wants 24/7 support and availability and access, and they expect self-service options. And then the last one is obviously it lightens the load on your overworked agent. So we're all asking our agents to do more, asking sometimes to do more with less. So anything that we can do to deflect some of that volume, especially on reduced tasks that are repetitive and unengaging, things like wrong numbers, for example, just the better for the reps as a whole too.
Now, to add to that, fewer than 50% of customers prefer to speak with a human agent now, which has been a major shift in just the past 24 months.
Yeah, it happened rapidly, right? And it's another stat we expect to continue to grow. So this is kind of what we're talking today. So let's hop here to the next slide, and let's talk about identifying self-service opportunities. So, and really the goal of this exercise when you start talking about virtual agents, as we go to the next slide here, is how do you get that toe in the water? How do you start that process? And that really begins with understanding why your customers are calling you, why they're reaching out via email or text or voice or chat even. How are they contacting you and why? So historically, how have we done that, right? We've listened to a ton of phone calls. We've maybe looked at kind of our very basic IVR reports and made some assumptions. And when I say a bunch of phone calls, I mean a lot of phone calls, right? And then lastly, you can go out and you can just ask your agents, hey, what are the customers saying? None of these are bad. They're certainly very time consuming and a little bit narrow in focus, but they're not bad. But Boris, you want to talk to us about really why we're here and what this newly rapidly evolving better way is?
Yeah, absolutely, Jason, and I think you're spot on from the standpoint that these are all the right things to be doing from the standpoint of understanding all of your customers. So we see people doing this sort of in spades today, right? Whether it's listening to phone calls, reviewing emails, chat conversations, whether it's actually sending out surveys to agents, even sending out surveys to customers, right? Like, what are the things that we could do to help you out, sort of treat all of your problems holistically in a much, much better way. But there's a better way to do this, and it's more of an efficiency gain. If you actually move on to the next slide, Jason, one of the ways and one of the tools that we have within our arsenal of tools at LiveVox is the Speech IQ tool, which actually can help you analyze all of the conversations that you're having today and bring that into one consolidated fashion, sort of aggregate those metrics for you. So that way you can, I'll call it like jump, if you will, a few steps ahead and not have this an extremely manual exercise. So I encourage everybody today who's sitting here, whether you're going to end up going fully down the virtual agent path, or whether you're going to go down at a particular step, I think nothing is more important than understanding the frequency of particular issues that your customers are calling about, the experiences that they're having calling in about those issues, and then identifying and saying, hey, is this happening quite often? Is this particular issue happening quite often? Can I actually do something about this? What would be the value associated with actually doing something about it or automating it? So those are the things I think we want to answer. I think there's actually a really good tool that we're happy to offer you that actually provides that capability.
Yeah, Boris, going back to kind of the way that it's been done historically, that's been done with agent term codes, right?
That's right.
And with every additional term code you give an agent, because you may have a large percentage of calls that fall into one call driver, but you could have hundreds of subsets, right? And we've learned over the years, I think all of us, that the more term codes you give an agent, the more noise there becomes in that data set, because agents, just like all of us, are a bit of a creature of habit, and they're going to click the ones they're used to. So you get a big bucket of kind of generic results that aren't giving you true insight into why your customers are calling.
Right, right. Absolutely spot on. I mean, I think there's a higher probability that somebody picks an incorrect term code and or is confused about it, and then what you were doing isn't like an apples to apples comparison from that standpoint. So certainly, I agree with you, Jason, 100%. Just leaving this to human interpretation is fraught with error. So, like, what does this look like? I think I love showing this as an example fairly frequently to clients and prospects. But what does the endpoint look like? Well, the endpoint looks like something like this. This is a sample data set, and it actually highlights some call data drivers for this particular contact center and identifies how often it's happening. And I know the percentages may look small, but if you look at them and you multiply them by the number of call volume, you can really sort of see the frequency that this is happening. It's fairly easy then from an executive standpoint to take a look at this and say, okay, well, the cost of actually servicing these inquiries, whether that's a balance or a rebooking or questions around taxes and fees, the cost of that times my agent's time times the call, so on and so forth, is X. And so I think that's pretty phenomenal to right away be given an ROI associated with a particular conversation. When you double that down with sentiment, which we'll just talk about in just a few seconds, you really start to not only identify the financial impact of this, but also the I'll call it the customer experience impact of this as well, which is I think where you're going to take us next, right, Jason?
That's correct. So I think, Dave, did you want to cover this one?
Sorry, I can't even see it right now. No, I had 13 down, or sorry.
No worries. I got this. So
easy wins.
Again, it's really about getting more granular with your data. And this example is a really basic one, but you can see here the result is shore excursion. We're using a cruise line as an example here, but these call drivers are shore excursions. But you can see that there are very different subsets of that, right? They want to book an excursion, they need to change an excursion, they want to upgrade, they just have a question, they want to verify. So it's not enough to say a customer's calling to dispute a bill. I mean, let's put this in very, very basic terms for our customers today. Everyone on this call has a customer dispute result code. Okay, fine. Does that tell me if we sent out a batch of incorrect bills? Does that tell us if we had a promotion going on that we didn't follow up on correctly? It doesn't tell me any of that information. It just says I have a chunk of my customers that don't agree with what I say they owe us, and I don't have the insight to make any sort of actionable decisions about that. So that's why I like, when Boris talks about call drivers and getting very granular about specific subsets of reasons for calls, it becomes very important and very powerful. And you'll see that as we start talking about tuning these virtual assistants. So let's hop to the next slide here.
Here we go.
Sorry, Dave, I jumped ahead on you. Sorry.
This is all me. What are your easy wins? Well, your easy wins is something we at LiveVox like to call your greatest hits. People call in for many reasons, we all know, but the vast majority of those calls all come down to those individual companies, top 5 to 10 intents, the whole reason for those calls. As an example, and I'm sure most on this call are familiar with these, but a company might automatically send out a reminder to a customer the day of their service appointment. They had already received a reminder from the service repair team in the morning that they'll be out at 1 p.m. Yet the customer might call in 15 minutes prior to service showing up just to confirm that they are still coming. Consumers, humans, we can be funny, fickle about all sorts of things. And so clearly this is just another case where self-serve can take place. It's whether it's dollar payments, one-time exceptions, reconfirmations, you will start with your greatest hits and build from there, which eventually uncovers those unexpected reasons they called in for. And those in general can still be addressed by your AI and give you some really important insight for future, problems down the road.
And, you pointed out earlier, Dave, that, with topics like this that are simple, customers don't want to talk to somebody. They just want to know if their delivery's coming or not. Hey, just like we all go on Amazon every day, when's my pair of shoes I didn't really need going to show up today? And now they can tell you how many houses away it is, right? So that's the same thing. They don't want to talk to somebody to get that information, or even making a payment. You know, we have some folks, a lot of folks in the collection space that are on the call right now, and I think we all feel this. There's a level of uncomfortability or even embarrassment for some customers when they're calling in. They just want to make a payment, take care of their business, and just get out of the way. And the virtual assistant's a super easy way to accommodate that in customers. So yeah, thanks for sharing on those. Hop to the next slide here. So Boris, you want to kind of give we've said virtual agents a lot here. You want to kind of give us an idea of kind of the core differences between that and a traditional IVR?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of folks here are familiar with an IVR and the way that it functions. And by the way, even though this is a conversation around AI and virtual agents, that's not to say that your best strategy isn't an IVR strategy necessarily yourself. So why do I say that on a webinar like this? Well, as everybody can imagine, there's a right place and a right time. Like, you know, if you have a job to do, there's a right tool for that job. You don't want to overshoot necessarily and build a much bigger tool than necessary for the job. So let's talk about an IVR. Where are they absolutely great? The IVRs are absolutely great in terms of defining and creating, I'll call it fairly structured paths for the consumer. You may hear them a lot. Hey, press 1 for sales, 2 for service, 3 for the HR department. If that's what you're looking to do, you're looking to just route the customer to a specific queue of agents within your contact center, guess what? The IVR is going to be a really, really great tool for you, and the customer will probably find it fairly easy to navigate, and it's a fairly simple thing to set up in a LiveVox environment or in another environment that you may be already utilizing for telephony today. However, where is the virtual agent the better solution of the two versus an IVR? The virtual agent is a better solution where you have many, I will call it nested paths within the IVR today, and customers are calling in and are wanting to be routed to multiple paths within your IVR. So if you can imagine yourself sitting here and thinking, okay, well, I have this huge Visio diagram, which is commonly how people design IVRs, and I have a particular path, let's say, to make a payment, but then I have a different path actually to, let's say, check on my balance, and a different path to maybe do like a money transfer function that exists today. You may be thinking today, oh boy, like this looks complex to me on my Visio diagram. Now imagine or put this into your own customer shoes. How would they feel? They don't have this diagram, if you will, that's been created. So how will they traverse all of these nodes and all of these options? And so what a virtual agent does in a much, much better way for you is it allows customers not only to be able to, like in an easier path, navigate these different nodes and these options, but it also allows them to jump from a particular node should they have multiple intents that are happening at the same time. In addition to that, what it also does from a virtual agent capability, it speaks or tries to speak in the natural language or natural language processing capability, if you will, of a virtual agent. So you may call something, let's say, money transfer. Somebody may call it money movement. Some may call it like, moving an account or closing an account, whatever it may be. But it really starts to speak to the language of the person that is giving you actually a call. And therein lies the better navigational capability that a customer may have with a virtual agent versus a traditional IVR.
So, Boris, example I like to use, and I think everybody on this call has probably had to call some hospital or some medical organization about a bill at some point in their lives, and it is interesting with an IVR. They are fixed and rigid with 9 options per route, right? And you're like, for billing, press 1. For if you're the primary insurance holder, press 9. If you like, when the alternative in a virtual agent is you saying, I need another copy of my December bill. Right. Thank you. It's on the way. See you later. So it's that finite number of paths you can go down. And I love your Visio example because the uglier that thing gets, and we've seen some monsters and we've built some monsters, right? But the more pages and off-page links that goes, the more complicated and frustrating you're making it for your customers.
Yeah, I agree with you spot on, Jason. And one of the things that I also think a lot about is the building of that IVR originally, and then that sort of monster Visio flow. The thought that comes to mind right away is that it used to get built once, it would rarely get reviewed, and the notion of making changes within that system itself would be such an enormous effort that majority of people shied away from it. It was usually rolled up in that, remember that super printed Visio diagram in a corner of an IT administrator, and it was so scary to make a change. One of the things that's drastically different between an IVR and a virtual agent is that it really gives our clients the capability to not only explore the data that's coming into the virtual agent itself, but also to define new paths in a fairly easy administrative way. I mean, I'm not saying that this is like super simple, like clicking two things. However, the advances in technology have made it simple enough where it's no longer a scary thing that needs to be, that needs to be really, really thought through.
No, you're right. I mean, I've built IVRs. I think most people on this conversation, on this webinar today, have at least had a hand in that. And if you have to change what press 4 means on that first branch, every step after that has to be revised, and it's a pain, and it's not fun, and it has to be well thought through. And it's certainly, the rigid part is important because it's certainly not great for things that are happening currently. So COVID's a great example, right? Most organizations sent some sort of COVID-related messaging on their IVR. It's to go in and rebuild that, or at a very minimum, create a brand new level at the top, which everything then branches off of.
Yeah, and one example that I'll also give people that should resonate with people. People have learned, sort of, if you will, traits of behavior that occur. So, like the option you were saying of pressing 4, Jason. Well, inevitably, whenever you set up an IVR, you're going to get a lot of people trained to press 4, and that's fantastic. But at some point, you'll realize that you have a lot of people going down maybe the wrong route. Maybe they pressed 5, but they really actually should have pressed 4. And so now you go back and you think, well, should I change the way that I'm recording the prompt for press 4? Okay. And then the weird thought starts to come into your mind. When I change that, will my people who used to press 4 and feel confident, and in other words, go down that path, would they no longer feel just as comfortable pressing 4, or will they now get confused? In other words, will I create a bigger issue by changing the way that prompt sounded? And the short answer is yes, all the time. However, with a virtual agent, this is the beauty of it. The prompts are not necessarily hard-coded and defined. So as people speak to the intent, like the new intent, like meaning the misrouted people are speaking to the new intent, and you identify that they're actually that intent or their real category should have been sort of number 4, you can automatically change to route them without impacting your prior flow. And that's, I think, the big difference in terms of what makes the solution much more flexible than the traditional IVRs of the past.
Yeah, it's a great point about the misrouted, because then you're not just impacting the customer who may have done it on purpose, they may have not have, but you're then impacting 2 additional agents at a minimum. So that's a great point. So let's hop to the next slide. Boris just gave you a lot of information there, which is super valuable. But this is what I think is really cool. Now I've got these virtual agents, and you realize you can monitor them just like you would a traditional agent, right? So I have wall boards, I have my ACD panel, and I can see calls coming into agents, virtual agents, them transferring out to the queue onto the floor. So this gives you a real big piece of visibility into not only what your queue looks like, but your handle times, your transfer outs, your fail outs. And one of the cool things about this is there's nothing stopping you from going in and monitoring this phone call just like you would with a traditional agent. So let's say you see virtual agent 12351's been on a call for 9 minutes with customer Dave Buman. There's nothing stopping one of your supervisors going, maybe I take a listen here and see what's going on. So this is kind of that aha moment that gets you to the next page. So you've got your agents, you've got your wall boards that are showing not only your current agents, your virtual agents. So let's hop to the next slide and let's talk about what that means. I mean, beyond it just being kind of cool to do, Now you can understand your customer's experience because you're building a library of content for those conversations, right? So again, back to Boris's point about an IVR. I know that Boris pressed 4, then 7, then 2, then he pressed 0 75 times because he wanted to talk to an agent. That's the extent of my understanding of what Boris did with that IVR. But with this, you're starting to understand not only what your customers are saying and why they're saying it, and modifying the conversation flow, but you're starting to understand the sentiment, right? So perfect example. We had a customer a while back that had a traditional IVR, and we noticed that a very large people were hanging up during one route. And there was no way for us to really understand why without just starting to do what you suggested earlier and just listening to people and pushing buttons. So all I'm hearing is key press, key press, key press. I'm not learning much. But then we started to hear that when we said something like, please hold, it may take up to 30 seconds to connect you with an agent, people were audibly saying, I'm not holding for 30 seconds and hanging up the phone. So we changed that prompt. No problem. That took a lot of man and woman hours to sit there and listen to these phone calls. But the cool thing about this is now is you can start to hear, okay, did Sharon Stevens start screaming and get angry and start talking over the virtual assistant when we asked for the last word for social? Do we need to change our method of validation? So I think this is really, really cool because it's not now as much about, convenience and success rates as much as it is giving your customers not only a fast experience, but one that they're happy with. So I think the sentiment analysis is very cool. And we have people working on this now, but you can see, look at these examples: ridiculous, stupid, awful, not what you want to hear from a virtual assistant. So that gives you an opportunity, Boris, to your point, to go back there and tune that message and maybe make it a little bit softer, a little more polite, maybe give them a little bit, maybe an easier path to that next step.
This is such a powerful feature. And these are all great points, Jason. I mean, analyzing that sentiment leads to plenty of opportunities to service the customer in so many ways. Just as an example, they may be frustrated and no longer want to speak on the phone. You could offer them the option to transition to a two-way, SMS text conversation with the agent without missing a beat. Again, I guess it all comes down to being able to engage, the customer on the channel they want, when they want it, and it needs to be simplistic.
Yeah, Boris. Dave makes a great point. I know you promote this, as you kind of own the product from a text messaging perspective. Anytime you're going to have failouts, right? We know that we're going to have failouts of any virtual assistant or IVR. But anytime you can fail that customer out to a two-way text message, you then took an agent from a one-to-one conversation to a one-to-many customers conversation. So it's a great point, Dave. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, and one of the things that I would like to add here is that this is a really important tool whenever you're trying to sell I'll call it the notion of introducing a virtual agent into the notion of your contact center. A lot of you are probably here and thinking, okay, look, this is a great idea. I'm sold on the notion of this. But when this gets sort of taken up to executive level management, the fear is, wait, are my customers now going to be talking to virtual agents? And I hear a lot of hesitation at times with people's voices as we're not that sort of type of business. We're a human type of business. And I think this is sort of like a reassurance for many to say, hey, yes, we're going to attempt to do this, but guess what? We're going to be able to play back conversations, the good conversations, the bad conversations. We're going to score and understand the bad conversations. And we're going to listen to them jointly to understand why the conversation went badly so that we could correct it. And if this works out, this is going to provide a lot of efficiency with our business. And if it doesn't, I think a lot of people would have said that they would have learned a lot from introducing that. And maybe you are a people business, but until you actually deploy this, you won't have the data to come back and prove your point.
Great point, Boris. Let's hop ahead to the next slide here.
Yeah, so this goes back to the conversation that we were just having in terms of understanding and being able to categorize some of the intents that are coming in. And I look at this data and I think a little bit about this in kind of a couple of different fashions. One is to be able to display this data to your executive team to indicate why and what are the conversations that are having and being made and how difficult those conversations are essentially to automate, and then the cost of those particular conversations. And when you can quantify it and show that to people in a visual chart, it really starts to resonate with them in terms of what needs to be completed in order to move your organization into a more self-service fashion. Move forward. Okay. So the question becomes, okay, what should we do? And Jason, I think you do this and you handle clients every single day to go through this path. So if you wouldn't mind kind of presenting that to the folks here today.
Yeah, and I'm gonna, before I do that, I'm gonna answer this question's come in a couple of times. I want to be very clear. This technology is here and it's available today, right? I mean, Boris, there are people on your team building these virtual assistants out for our customers today. This isn't U18, this isn't U25. This is April 21st, right?
Yep, absolutely. I think this is ready and now, and available to clients today. What I also loved about the earlier slide that you talked about is that this is no longer black box technology. And what I specifically mean by that is that, one, your end product is an actual end product that you hear actual customers being on, that you can actually tap into beyond just your initial test that you're going to go through and run through with this virtual agent. So I think that's one. I think the second part is actually there's a visual layer that actually shows you the way that these intents are structured and the way that the customers flow through those intents. So where maybe, 2 years ago, some years ago, this was really sort of, I'll call it weird science happening in the back, and you just had to quote unquote trust it. There's less and less of that from a technology standpoint. You can actually visually see this, and you can see it taking effect immediately as you deploy this. And I think that's the real big differentiator where the technology has come through over the course of the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we didn't have a slide on it because, we do have a finite amount of time here today, but taking the notion of analyzing the data of a virtual agent like you would your agents on the floor is a big deal, because you're starting to trend over time your fail out rates. Am I getting better as an operations and technical team of tuning my virtual assistant to make it better for the customer to handle? Ultimately, that's the goal, right? Stop passing calls to agents. And I don't want anybody on this call to believe that this replaces agents entirely. There's always going to be that customer that calls in and says, I broke my son's iPhone, my daughter needs to change her phone number, and my other daughter wants a pink phone, and I need all those to happen right now. A virtual assistant's not the way to do that. But, when you're talking about data and analyzing handle times over time and failovers over time and customer satisfaction over time, just like you do with your agents, with a virtual assistant, it becomes less of a commodity and more of a strategic tool, in my opinion. So that's all well and good. How do you get there, right? This is all very brand new for most people on this call. So, Dave pointed out, play the hits, just like your favorite band. Just play the hits. Let's play the hits, and then we'll start hearing those. We'll stick around for the stuff on your new album, right? So you want to build that virtual assistant with 5, 6, 7 things that your customers are calling about today. Using customer care example. I got a problem with my stuff. Where's my stuff? I don't want to pay for my stuff. I have a question about my bill. That's it, right? I mean, and stuff is different for everybody on this phone call, but that's the reasons people call, right? So if you start there and you build, and you don't have to solve every single reason or call intent or call driver on that first pass, because what you do from there is you start building that data and building that library and understanding how you can get better, how you can improve, what your customers love and what they hate about what you've built. Because they're going to tell you. I mean, if anybody's ever, I'm guilty. I've yelled at a virtual assistant before. I know David has. I know Boris has. It's usually some poor airline where we're just trying to get home, but we're yelling at it. And being able to quantify that into measurable data is a big deal. So the last part of this is the most important part, right? Just reach out to your account team. We have some really great people that have joined us and some people that have always been with us, like David, that's new to the team. And this is what they do, and this is what they're experts in, so they can guide you down that path. So we're definitely here to partner with you on that.
Let's
go ahead.
I was going to say we're witnessing a game changer unfold in the technology right now. It's a revolution of technology change, and it's still at its infancy. And to kind of throw it into perspective for some, in the late 80s, we were still using a paper, pen, and a fax machine to conduct business. Then we moved into the software, which still needed humans, and now we have been shifting from software to AI and chatbot world. Consumers, us, everything has changed, evolved, and advanced, yet many businesses are still behind the times and are now just starting to realize they need to catch up.
Yeah, that's a good point. So don't remind us about fax machines. It's a tough day.
No.
Steph, let's hop to the next slide here. So again, this is not, and the question just came up again. I want to be clear. This is an offering that LiveVox has today, right? We have the people on the pro serve side and your client team, your account teams that will help you get there. We can help you if you don't have the information. We can help you identify your customer intents and call drivers. I think that most folks on this call have a good gut for that, but we can certainly help you quantify that. And there's some baselines for every vertical that we can help you out with. But yeah, this is here, and we've got the folks to help. So I would encourage you again, reach out to your account teams. This is something you want to kick off. The value prop is great, right? Especially when you can monitor and review this stuff live and in short near time. It's to Boris's point, it's not a black box and you're wondering, well, did that work or not? This is very transparent data that's easy to analyze. So top ahead here, and fortunately in this deck there's going to be a ton of content. If we can jump ahead one slide here. So the marketing team has added some resources that will go out as a link from this recording after the fact. And I believe there's 4. So on the next slide, we'll see the first 2. And it's just a couple published docs that we can share. One is an ebook on the evolution of AI and practical applications in the contact center. The other is what we're talking about today, right? Simplifying that process. And on the next slide, there's 2 more resources that'll again be linked to this when you get the recording. And one is just kind of a description of what Boris and his teams have been doing from virtual assistants, and the other is about AI. So really cool stuff there. Again, we got a lot of people working on this. The technology is exciting. The goal for everyone on this call is to implement it the right way and make it a pleasurable experience for your customers, right? So we did have some other questions come through, I think, and then we'll probably get people out of here a little early. Boris or Dave, either one of you take this. The question came up: do we support Spanish in our virtual assistants?
Yes.
That's an easy one.
Bilingual. Yep.
So this next question that came in was: if a customer fails out of a virtual assistant, will the agents receive any information on the customer? Boris, you want to take that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, if the customer had authenticated, the agent would receive a full screen pop of who the customer is that's been called. There would be, of course, the activity there as well. I think I know where the question is going from the standpoint of like which tidbits will they receive about the conversation. That we're working on that particular piece to display from a visual perspective. But there will be a smooth handoff between the virtual agent and the actual agent.
Yeah, and just like anybody that's using our IVRs today, if the customer pressed 9 because they wanted to make a payment, at a minimum you're going to know it's Boris calling and Boris tried to make a payment. So yeah, that is definitely there. So this I'll take this one. The customer says, "Can you describe the customer experience? Is there a prompt, etc.?" Really comes down to how you envision this. I would say that the best practice here is, thank you for calling LiveVox. And again, you're not going to fool anybody anymore. If they know it's the virtual assistant, and that's okay. To David's point, most people at this point are okay with that. So there's no reason to try to dupe them. So starting the conversation with, "Thanks for calling LiveVox. My name is Jason. I'm a virtual assistant. How can I help you today?" That's it. And then let them talk. If you wanted to kind of prod them down the path and say, you can say things like, make a payment or a question about my bill. You can certainly do that. I mean, I think it really comes down to what you want your customer experience to be. Boris, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. I would add to that. I think nesting people, there's a little bit to get a little bit geeky, but the nesting technique actually works really, really well. And our solutions team will help you identify nesting opportunities. What I mean by that is that, look, if you have 100 intents, customers can't guess all the 100 things you may be able to support. So nesting the thought process of your customer by saying, I can help you with sales-related items or service-related items or support-related items, gets a particular customer to say, oh, I'd like to ask you a question about a support-related item, which kind of takes you down a particular path. That's still very, very important because, again, your customers don't know that you support 100 intents. And by the way, nor should they. And so nesting those thoughts for customers is very, very important in making your virtual agent more effective.
So, Boris, this question is kind of interesting. I think we're starting to trend into like the beginning of the Terminator movie here. Can the virtual agent sense the frustration of a customer and suggest a transfer? I mean, look, at a minimum, you can tell if Boris, if you repeated yourself, to Dave's point earlier, I would certainly say if a customer's kind of said the same thing twice and they're kind of, you can feel that the virtual assistant can detect at a minimum a stall out. And that's where it's great to say, by the way, seems like you're having trouble here. Would it be better if I connected you via text to an agent? They could be like, yes, please, right? So will we sense that they're frustrated? I guess sky's the limit. I mean, the tech's evolving quickly, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so now, you can look for keywords and key patterns to choose to route off of. So the answer is yes. So if there is, let's call it particular phrases, keywords, inappropriate as they may be, you can choose to sort of route people in a certain way. But whether you're speaking loudly or speaking softly, the agent right now, or at least our agents right now, don't necessarily pick up, if you will, frustration levels on that. I mean, I think that's certainly where things are headed, where they're headed in that particular direction. Some people may also wonder whether that's a good thing overall as well. Like, everybody has already learned that pressing 0 routes you to an agent. Does that mean that if I yell at my virtual agent, I should get routed to customer? I think that's a philosophical conversation. So I'm sure there's people have different takes, but the short answer is no. The answer is no. The virtual agent doesn't route based on you yelling at it louder.
Yeah, and the good news is that speech analytics does know that, right?
Correct.
We do know that. So you can identify patterns and say, boy, oh boy, 30% of our customers really don't like it when we say X.
Right.
So there is a learning to it, and that's the key to all this. So one more question. I know we're kind of bumping up against the end here. Boris, I'll let you have this one because this is an easy one. It's fun one. Is there a limit to the number of calls virtual assistants can handle at the same time?
No, there is not at this point.
And Sarah, this came in. So the way that works, if you go back to that ACD view that we talked about, you would see, let's say you had 75 on a call, you would see 75 virtual agents going through that life cycle of a phone call. So when you looked up on the wallboard and saw your inbound queue, had no calls on hold and 75 virtual agents active, you would know what's going on there. So yeah, I just wanted to make a point to that because I know the screenshot was one agent. No, we treat each like an individual agent. So you could say, name them what you want, but virtual agents 1 through 100, you would have agent statistics for those virtual agents. So Boris, David, look, and everyone on the call, I appreciate your time. I know everybody's super busy. I think we've come to the end here. Again, if there's something that wasn't answered that you kind of got stuck in your head, or this is intriguing to you, and I hope it is, again, reach out to your account teams. We'll get you the resources you need. We'll start having those conversations, and we'll get the value proposition from you, and we'll start turning this into a reality for you and your customers. Steph, with that, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen. Again, if you still have questions, we're going to leave it open for a couple more seconds so you can enter them in the Q&A section, and we'll respond back to you individually after the event. A copy of this webinar and its presentation will be sent over to you after the event as well. And I think last but not least, I think the biggest takeaway is that if you want to get started, just to have a conversation with how that works in your organization, regardless of what kind of business segment you're in, the takeaway is just to reach out to your account managers, and they will facilitate a discussion with the gentleman on this call today. So thank you again. I still see some questions open. I'll give it maybe 10 more seconds. And again, if we don't capture here, reach out to your account managers. Thank you so much, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.